We got the old bait and switch working for you because I am not Steve Malzberg. I am, however, his substitute for the day, Dennis Neal, longtime journalist, recent TV anchor, refugee, having a ball here today on the Steve Malzberg Show. We've been talking about a variety of things. We've been talking about the limits or lack of limits of government power. And now we're going to move into a new phase. You know, it seems to me that this administration, when it comes to how to fix the economy, really kind of, its economic policies boiled down to basically patronage. Because if you look at what raising the minimum wage would be, it's kind of a patronage play when you come down to it. It's not going to really help the economy. In fact, it could cost the economy 500,000 jobs, according to the studies from the Congressional Budget Office. Now we're going to bring on a guest, Sabrina Schaeffer. She is the executive director of the Independent Women's Forum, to discuss raising the minimum wage. We appreciate your being here with us, Sabrina. And you know, it always seems like such an instant popular idea. President Obama proposes to raise the minimum wage from the current $7.25 to $10.10 an hour. That's a 39% raise overnight. And of course, then the people making $10 an hour are going to want to raise themselves up to 11 or 12 to stay ahead of the entry-level guys. Do you like the idea of raising the minimum wage, Sabrina? And thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. And no, I don't like the idea, and that's not because I'm not compassionate or that I'm not interested in helping the poor. But I don't think that this is a common sense way or sort of the silver bullet that many Democrats and progressives have made it out to be. I think it's actually very unfair to the many, many people, especially women, who are going to lose jobs as a result of this.
Especially women will lose jobs as a result of this. Why would that be? Because ordinarily I would think that an activist for women would be in favor of raising the minimum wage because women in pay, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think one of the big things is that it's a myth that minimum wage earners are all living in poverty. The reason people live in poverty is not because of low wage jobs. It's because they don't have paid, consistent work. The fact is that only 9% of people living in poverty had full-time work last year. Similarly, 67% didn't have work at all. So the big issue is job creation. That's what would really help. And the reason it would hurt women in particular is that women account for nearly 2/3 of part-time workers. And these workers are a lot more likely to be earning minimum wage, and they're also a lot more likely to have their jobs cut if need be. So women are definitely much more vulnerable to job losses.
Yeah, Sabrina, you just said that among people living at the poverty level, that only 9% are working full-time. Did I hear that right?
That's correct. That's what I think is really left out of this conversation.
We keep hearing the lament of the working poor, and Walmart isn't paying its people enough to live. And we keep hearing that as the big complaint. It is as if that the reason there are poor people is because companies aren't paying them enough. But what you're telling us is that the bigger reason there's poor people is because something like 91% of them don't have jobs. Well, that certainly colors that entire thing in a different way. You know, the CBO came out and said that if you raise that minimum wage 39%, as the president wants to do, as he's already done for federal contract jobs, that you will eliminate 500,000 jobs. Another study I looked at, Sabrina, showed that in European countries, if you look at the youth unemployment rate, in countries that have a minimum wage versus countries that don't have a minimum wage, the unemployment rate among the youth in countries with a minimum wage, meaning, oh, everyone's going to earn more, is 30%, compared with only 20%. It's half again higher. Why is it that politicians, I think even some Republicans, support raising the minimum wage? Is it just low-hanging fruit and it's a cheap little gimme?
Yeah, it absolutely is. This is similar to why so many, even Republicans, start getting behind, workplace regulations like the Paycheck Fairness Act. It sounds compassionate, it sounds nice, but the bottom line is you're absolutely correct about what this would do to younger workers. The fact is that the people who would be hurt the most are those with the least amount of experience, the least amount to lose, so to speak. Entry-level jobs, which are often minimum wage earning jobs, give people much more than just the salary, right? These are critical skill learning opportunities. These are a place that people start their building their resume. And if we eliminate them, which is going to happen, whether the left wants to admit it or not, but if you force minimum wage up, it's going to mean job losses, and it's going to be for the very people who can't afford to lose those jobs.
Yes, it is kind of lamentable, especially because, as you point out, When you decide that McDonald's now has to start paying $10.10 an hour to a person with no experience, a 17-year-old who's shoveling French fries, and then you lay off 17-year-olds, they're not learning the responsibility of getting dressed for work, the responsibility of how to fit in inside an organization and that kind of thing. Well, what do you think, though? You know, because somehow this minimum wage has been linked into the wealth gap debate,
yes.
where President Obama has said his biggest, for the rest of his presidency, he wants to narrow that gap. I never understand why it is that the focus always is on how to pound down the top instead of lifting the bottom. Minimum wage will not lift the bottom. The average minimum wage person stays in that job only a year or so. That's not the way to lift the bottom, right? We need more jobs, more companies, more business.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's interesting that it's Kennedy who said, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? But it's as if progressives and Democrats have forgotten this. The very best thing we can do for all Americans, men, women, poor, wealthy, is economic growth and job creation. If we really want to sort of inject some more security into the job market, we should be repealing Obamacare. That is the single biggest threat to job creation today. So things like, you know, passing greater workplace regulations, things like the Paycheck Fairness Act or hiking the minimum wage, these are, as you put it, low-hanging fruit. They make people feel good. They are going to ultimately backfire and hurt the very people they are supposedly intended to help.
Do you think that the minimum wage increase pushed by Obama and the Democrats ultimately will pass?
You know, I'm not so sure it will. I take some, I take some hope from what's happened with the Paycheck Fairness Act, which was voted on now 3 times and has been consistently voted down. I do think that there are a lot of people who recognize that this is going to have ill economic impacts, and they don't want to vote on that. I think people are looking for longer-term, real, concrete solutions. So I'm going to hold out some hope and think that this doesn't necessarily go through. But you can bet that it's going to be tied to women's security from now till the election.
Yes, it will be. And when Republicans oppose raising the minimum wage, I'm sure that will be depicted again by the Democrats as part of the supposed war on women. You know, we keep saying that, we keep hearing that women earn only 77 cents for every $1 that men earn at work. But those figures don't account for and don't take into consideration that many women are school teachers, many men are engineers. Engineering pays more than school teaching pays as a job. We don't take into account that many women drop out of the workplace for 5 to 10 years for child rearing and then come back. And if you adjust that and you look at men who drop out of the workplace for 5 or 10 years and come back, their earning isn't that much more than women's. And that when you start to wipe out all these other factors, that 77 cents is closer to 96 cents on the dollar for men. But what do we do, Sabrina, about the working poor? What do we do to increase their opportunity? Because one big problem is our economy is in the middle of this big tectonic plate shift away from making big things like cars and tractors that people without a college education could end up getting paid $30 an hour for in great unionized blue-collar jobs. We now are an economy based on bits and atoms and moving around, zapping around emails, and unfortunately that doesn't employ blue-collar employees with no college degree. What do we do to help the working poor if we don't raise the minimum wage?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to start focusing on the root causes of this poverty. And one of the reasons that we know that more people are not succeeding in the workplace is because they don't have the education and the skills to do so. And I can guarantee that almost every single one of those Democrats who's supporting raising the minimum wage has also stood in the way of some kind of educational freedom state legislative bill, whether it's a voucher bill or a tax credit bill or charter schools. These people don't want to see competition in education. This is the number one way to help people, help themselves. We need to stop spending. We have to get our $17 trillion debt, which is going to burden all of these hardworking Americans with higher taxes in a way that they simply won't be able to afford. We need to repeal Obamacare so people aren't tied to these jobs in a way that they can't get away from. This job lock is a real thing, but we don't want to have more government-run healthcare. We want to give people more freedom instead. There's so many things we could actually do that would help people. But all of these kind of so-called Band-Aid solutions are not going to help people the way we think they will.
I think that Art Laffer, the father of the Laffer curve
Right.
and supply side economics, had one of the best proposals that I had heard. He said, why don't you let companies that move into the inner city and depressed areas open up a factory there, hire people there, let the companies earn tax-free for 10 years, and let the employees who live in that neighborhood and work at that factory also earn tax-free for 10 years, and then maybe you'd have people kind of drawing and going there and building. It's a fantastic idea from the guy whose supply side economics is said to have actually hurt poor people. And yet the things you talk about, Sabrina, you have no hope, do you, that any of that stuff will get done? Because given the gridlock in Washington, unless of course the midterms hand both the House and Senate to Republican control?
Well, I think this is why. I mean, some of these things need to be done on the state level, right? I mean, so absolutely, things like school choice are things that shouldn't be done at the federal level anyway. So I do have some hope. I do think that things like health care is a massive hurdle. And you're right. November elections are extremely important.
Yeah, extremely important. All right, Sabrina Schaeffer, you got an awful lot of conservative views there for a person with the Independent Women's Forum. I mean, I really am guilty of kind of thinking I'd be hearing a whole bunch of pro-women, war on women type of stuff. And I appreciate your being here.
I'm a big believer in limited government.
Yeah, you sure do believe in limited government here. Now, okay, and what's the next course of action you figure, though? I mean, how do you manage to get something kick-started here, Sabrina?
Well, we're going to continue pushing our ideas out on broadcast media. We have a book coming out that I hope people will pick up that is real concrete solutions on all of these issues, from energy policy to healthcare to tax and budget. We don't want to be the side that's constantly saying no. We want to have real solutions, and that's why we're releasing that at the end of June. So we hope that people will check our website out for that.
Are you yet ready to place a bet saying the Republicans take control of the Senate in the midterms?
You know, I think that there will be some victories, but I want to be very careful to say that if they win, it's not necessarily because they've actually grown and developed since 2012. It's
okay.
The political.
All right. We're going to wrap. Thank you very much for being with us. Good job, Sabrina Schaeffer. I'm Dennis Neal. We'll be right back with more of the Steve Malzberg Show.